Welcome back, bros. What's poppin'? Alright, so today we're gonna be reacting to why 2021 is going to be worse than this year. Now, I don't know. It seems like it's gonna be way more horrible than this one, but you know what? Let's keep going. Let's keep going, guys. We're strong. We'll be able to get through it. It's all good. But for real, for people who are having trouble with this, I feel bad. I really do. Hope y'all are doing alright. Anyway, let's react to the video. Alright, before I press the play button, make sure if you haven't already, go down there and hit that like button. And also subscribe. We're trying to get up to 1K maybe soon. So let's get it. Alright, 3, 2, 1, go.
We're sure a few of you have thought at some point this year, I can't wait for 2021. 2020 wasn't exactly a barrel of laughs for most people. We won't even go into biblical fires, floods, famine, and swarms of hungry locusts. COVID-19 was a good enough reason to get most people to admit that 2020 wasn't their favorite year to date. You don't have to get the virus.
I hated this year.
Thing. Maybe it robbed you of work. Maybe it drove you half crazy trying to fully understand it. Maybe it made you anxious and depressed as it did for millions of others. Maybe after lockdown you looked at your protruding belly and almost thought you were pregnant.
Okay, that wasn't me.
We
that
can
was
all
me.
take something negative from the pandemic. The question is, can things get any worse? Could 2021 be a kind of horror sequel to 2020? Do you
Yeah,
remember
it's probably
that
going to be.
tagline from the movie Jaws? Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. Let's imagine the movies. 2020, the year of the pandemic, and the sequel, 2021, the beginning of the end. Maybe you're now thinking, no way,
God.
no damn way will next year be worse than this. Things couldn't get any worse. Well,
wrong.
we're sorry to inform you, but things could always get worse. Now you need to hear how things could really go down the pan in 21. It goes without saying that if no COVID-19 vaccine was released and available to the public at large next year, then deaths could continue to spiral and lockdowns could carry on, destroying economies and wrecking families. As we write this, there's news about a vaccine, and it is positive news. Preliminary trials suggest it works, but it's early days. And also, as we write this, there has been a huge spike in COVID daily deaths. What if the virus mutates into something
A lot of people
worse?
are
Is that even possible?
allergic to it
According
too.
to Nature
So
magazine, one of the better science resources out there, the virus has been mutating.
it's getting
We tell you
stronger,
exactly
boys.
what a well-known virologist said about that, but for 99% of you, it would sound like scientific gobbledygook. In simple terms, yes, the virus has mutated. The good news is scientists came out and said the media exaggerated that. You can go online and see the numerous news stories with headlines saying things like mutation more contagious and mutation more deadly. That might not be true at the moment, but the fact is this virus could get worse next year. It's unlikely, but it definitely could happen. In November, a group of scientists was asked to predict what the state of the pandemic would be in 21, and you guessed it, they had no idea. One scientist at Yale said the Pfizer vaccine looks promising, but he also said even if the vaccine passes more trials with flying colors, it'll take many months to get people vaccinated. COVID will not magically disappear. Well, it likely won't. Viruses have been known to peter out in the past, but
I think there are only like 3
3
people who have taken the
Another
vaccine.
scientist said it won't be enough just vaccinating certain groups of people, i.e. those most vulnerable. In other words, we aren't going to solve the COVID problem just because we most likely have a vaccine that will stop COVID in its tracks for 80% of those that are given it. More virus casualties are only a possibility, but what's almost certain is the chaos that will happen next year because of global lockdowns. The fallout from lockdowns is very real. Some astute investors, COVID-19 contractors, tech folks, and vaccine makers might be getting incredibly rich as the sun shines down on empty streets. But the vast majority of folks have been hit hard by the pandemic. It might be bad now, but what about next year? It's hard to say just how many people have lost their jobs due to lockdowns. As
Bro,
we
the
write
homeless
this, The Guardian says
population has grown so
670,000
much.
jobs have been lost in the UK since the start
crazy.
of the year. Spain, a country that is very reliant on tourism for its economy, is said to be the hardest hit country in Europe. In Thailand,
that
it's
is
reported that
completely
1
true.
million people working in the tourism industry lost their job this year, and they had no help or hardly any help from the
1
government.
million?
OECD statistics show
Holy.
a massive economic decline in many countries. The Pew
That's a lot of
Research Center
people.
said in September 1 in 4 U.S. adults had trouble paying their bills since the outbreak. It also reported 25% of people said that someone in their house had lost their job. 50% of them found another job, but the other half is still unemployed. Okay, so these statistics are going to change a lot, but one thing is for sure, there will be no more magic wands available. Millions and millions of people around the world are going to face hardship and debt next year. COVID poverty is very real. We might see how these hardships manifest next year. We already know that in the US, suicide hotlines have been busier than ever this year. Worried about the effect stress has on the body? Yep, it negatively affects the efficacy of the immune system. That might translate into more health problems next year. In the US, there's already a drug addiction problem that is frankly out of control. The question is, with all this job loss, stress, and depression, do you think 2021 will see positive results regarding addiction? Listen to this excerpt from a research paper that was published in July. According to a recent study from the Wellbeing Trust, the high levels of stress, isolation, and unemployment due to the COVID-19 pandemic could cause up to 75,000 deaths of despair related to drug, alcohol, and suicide. What a bleak-sounding phase. Deaths of despair. That 75,000,
this is making me
only
feel
relates
awful.
to the
What
USA,
the freak?
a country with some social safety nets. As for suicides, we're not going to bother citing all the news media and studies. Look for yourself. Thoughts of suicide and actual suicide have increased in many countries. So, if you were the kind of person to gamble, how much money would you put on 2021 being a bumper year for addiction, suicide, ill health, and mental illness? What about crime rates? We already know this year the murder
crime rates are
went
high
through the roof in some big cities in the U.S. But do
Bro.
you think this will be a trend in 2021? What about domestic violence?
Huge.
What happens when you upset the flow of drugs and gangs and they struggle to get their cut? It's too early to say just how crime rates will be affected by lockdowns.
A lot
but
of
so
armed
far,
robberies,
the outlook
of
isn't
course,
good.
dude.
COVID has created a perfect
Holy
storm,
crap.
and we don't think anyone will disagree. The question is, how bad will the storm be? Maybe it'll fade away and not be half as bad as some people think, or maybe it'll be far worse. A real home wreck.
Imagine.
2021 could be the year that crime goes through the roof. Maybe some people already know this in the
man.
US because gun purchases drastically increased this year. Okay, so far we have mass job loss. As a result of this, we have stress. We also have depression and debt. We might see some more drug and alcohol use, and we might see surges in crime. Is that it? The end of the show? No, we're not even close to finishing. Things could get a lot worse. Imagine this scene. It's July 2021, and you just gone out to Walmart to pick up that gift for your aunt's birthday.
Right?
You walk through the doors, and before you can get that far, a robot that looks like a mini version of those Doctor Who Daleks approaches you. It doesn't say exterminate, but it says, do not enter. Go straight back home. You are currently in violation of Clause 6.0606 of the Enhanced Freedom to Not Do Much law. Do not ignore this demand. Oh, and you have an outstanding parking fine. And we also know about that sketchy website you visited at 2:38 p.m. last week. We're just kidding, of course, but privacy advocates around the world are right
I don't mind
very
this. I don't mind if
concerned
people are
about
like
new
looking
surveillance
into my
technology
lives,
and how
like the
it'll be
government. I don't
used or
mind it at all.
perhaps abused. We already have facial
I'm not too
recognition
skeptical
cameras that
about
can
that,
tell
so.
if you have a high temperature. We already have drones and robots that move around.
Actually, it
public
makes me feel a
spaces
lot
and
more
tell you what to
safer with
do.
all this
These
technology,
things might
but-
help in time of crisis, but is there a chance that this technology will create a kind of dystopia that we've been seeing in sci-fi movies for a while now? Some of the biggest human rights organizations
but we have
this
control
year
over it,
came out
so.
and said they were worried governments might use the pandemic as an excuse to curtail our freedom. When governments enforce restrictions on our freedom, they usually stay. And 2020 is just a warm-up for 2021. If the virus doesn't go away, perhaps in 21 we'll be tracked and traced to the extent that we start to
See,
feel
this
our
doesn't
freedoms
bother
have
me.
diminished. Well, next year,
If I'm being
usher in 3
tracked
states around the
by the
world,
government,
we've
I mean, I already
seen how
am. You got your
governments
phone and
spy on
everything.
us without telling us, but could things get
completely
a lot worse?
fine.
As the American Civil Liberties
You're being
Union
tracked
wrote,
anyway.
maybe after they've watched you outside and in your home and on the web, you'll become suspicious for the vaguest of reasons. This is what was said in a letter that was signed by more than 300 leading academics this year. We are concerned that some solutions to the crisis may, via mission creep, result in systems which would allow unprecedented surveillance of society at large. China is already a surveillance state that's criticized in the West.
That is true.
But don't be
That's really
surprised
true.
if in 2021 Western countries adopt the China monitoring model. Welcome to the new normal, aka 1984, a true story by George Orwell. And for our viewers in China, well, we know you can only watch our show via proxy since YouTube is banned there. But just
Why is
know
YouTube
that
banned in
you're our
China?
thoughts. And what about that necessity we call
Why?
food? During the height of the
Yeah,
pandemic,
food
the
has
New York
decreased
Times
a lot.
reported
I
that
mean,
food
the price
banks
of
across
food
the
is
U.S.
just-
couldn't meet the demand of the hungry. Demand for food assistance is
In different
rising
countries,
at an
food is hella
extraordinary rate,
expensive.
said the newspaper. Will this suddenly go away in 2021? We doubt that. You could go online and read about food queues stretching for miles, and
Just
that's
order from
not
home,
only in the
goddamn.
US. The Guardian reported in November that there was an emerging group of people in the UK, what it called the newly hungry. these were mostly desperate middle-income families, not only poor families. So think about it. Economies
Why is
probably
this
won't go
leg
into
so freaking
hyperdrive in
skinny?
21. Jobs won't all just come back since so many businesses have gone for good. Get ready for a new normal of food banks popping up all over the place next year. Experts also think homeless rates will rise next year.
Yeah,
in the U.S., the
exactly.
Coalition for the Homeless said there
Everyone's
will be
just
a
getting
tsunami
thrown out of their houses
evictions
now.
if people don't get help from the government to assist them to pay their rent. This help will have to be ongoing if it's to work. Right now in the U.S., there's an eviction moratorium to protect people, but that's only in place until December 31st. One expert predicts mass evictions at the beginning of the new year. What an awful come-down that would be after the celebration.
Fireworks.
Let's also remember that while a lot of our viewers come from the U.S., millions of people who watch our shows come from countries that have very threadbare safety nets for people in place who've hit a financial rock bottom. What if people don't get the help they need? If you walk down some streets in LA or city centers in UK cities, you'd think these two countries
They
belong
get
to the
angry.
developing world or worse,
become homeless.
post-apocalyptic nations. The homeless
Hey.
problem is insane, and it could get much worse next year. The Washington Post
Bro,
wrote in
Chicago
September that
is
hundreds
insane.
of millions of people were
Full
on
of
the brink
homeless.
of starvation because of the pandemic. Oxfam wrote that the world should be prepared for a hunger
Same with
pandemic.
Italy, too.
Other organizations are warring off mass starvation in poorer nations that are already suffering from endless conflicts and agricultural chaos. The World Bank estimated in 2020 that by 2021 there will be 150 million more people living in extreme poverty. Maybe you think this won't affect you, but when the
Bruh.
chaos flaps its wings on one side of the world, it usually has a way of affecting the other side.
All
of
the
world.
prisons better get ready.
This is happening now. But
It's
what
gonna
if
fill up
millions of people
rapidly.
do start to face starvation? What can be the upshot of that besides dying or ill health? Well,
What kind of
one
forks
thing that
are
might happen is
those?
people start looking for a populist despot to get them out of the fix. More conflicts could break out, more war, more desperation. If history has taught us anything, it's that that's always
And
a
definitely
recipe for
more
disaster.
protest-
If wealthier nations start seeing more people without
I don't
enough
even
to
know
eat,
that word.
what
Never
might
mind.
be the consequence of that?
Protests there.
More desperate voters rallying behind the banner of a despot. More honest people turn
I
to a
need your
life of
money.
crime.
Food.
People will do anything
Give me
to
it.
survive. Not enough food in 2020 could mean devastation in 2021.
Yeah, there you go.
America's
Prisons are
infamous
just gonna
prison industrial
freaking
complex is probably
overfill.
getting ready for a big expansion. Could it get any worse than that? Yes, of course it
Yeah,
could.
of
Right
course.
now, we're seeing
Hell
a
yeah.
very divided country in terms of politics. Conservatives are constantly arguing with liberals,
There's
and
the
it seems
rich
no side
people,
will back down. The haves don't seem to care much about
the kind of poor
have-nots.
people,
The
and
latter
the
is
extremely
asking,
poor
"Who's
people,
got my
and
back?"
homeless.
The former cares less about poverty than it does
what
about
it's
who
like,
said
bro.
what on Twitter. Just look online and check out Protests 2020. It's been a big year for disagreements. This could, of course, lead to progressive change, and we all might live happily ever after, maybe in the long run anyway. But
Maybe.
what if all this division leads to larger protests that turn to violence that manifests as a civil war? Something has got to give. There has to be a middle ground, or 2021 could be a very ugly year. Let's not forget that people genuinely
chance
fight for
of
causes,
2021
but
of
when you throw in mass
becoming a
unemployment
more
and
horrible
hunger,
year is
sometimes
pretty high
anger
right
comes
now.
ahead of reason. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to have cash in 2021, but that doesn't mean you won't suffer. Travel research showed that during
Exactly.
lockdowns in 2020,
You won't be
people
able to
were
travel,
gunning
bro.
to get out of their country and travel. But what if that can't happen next year? What if borders
Yep.
don't open? What if the travel you have to navigate so much
A lot of
red
borders
tape,
are
it's
closed
just
right
not
now.
worth the trouble. That'll mean another year in the same place, watching the
I don't
same
think you can
disaster news,
leave the
wondering
US
when
right
you'll
now. I
ever
don't
be
know.
able to escape. Okay, so this is all very grim, but remember, it's a worst-case scenario show. Don't worry, soon we'll turn all this on its back and give you a best-case scenario show.
Who
We
knows?
hope we haven't depressed you. Remember, things could always be worse. And if you need a little silver lining, Keeping Up with the Kardashians will have its final
Freak's sake. Wow. Oh my god, that just made everything a lot worse. Bro, 2021 is gonna be an adventure. But you know what? Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have, make sure you go down there and hit that like button. I'd really appreciate that. And I'll catch you guys maybe tomorrow. Who knows? See ya.